Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a 5-game Major League Baseball slate. This is an interesting slate here. We have some good opportunities for pitching as well as across the board. Good value, good expensive plays. Basically, everybody's kind of viable on the slate with the way pitching is priced today, and there's not really any ace pitchers today, so that definitely gives us some utility across this board. Overall, I do have some core plays here on DraftKings and FanDuel. Gorman, Turner, and Varsho here on DraftKings, and on FanDuel, Gorman, Turner, Soto, and Varsho over here. So I do think those are our most valuable options on the slate. Let me go ahead and get started in the pitching, though. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really does help the channel a lot. I really do appreciate it. Also, check out Discord and Patreon, links in the description below. With that said, let's get into it here. So we're going to start with Nick Lodolo. Now, I don't love him today, but he has started the season pretty solidly, though this is going to be a home game for Cincinnati, and they are going against Philadelphia, who is a good team. And so he does have the best K rate on the slate. But he is a little bit risky given that situation. I don't think he's a must-play, but he is definitely a top-tier play when it comes to his strikeout potential. Then we'll look at it. The second best option here for Chris Bassett for Toronto. Now, he's pretty cheap here on both websites, in fact, but really good here on DraftKings at $8,200. He's got a better he's a little bit safer than Lodolo, and he's a little bit safer than Jordan Montgomery as well. He only has had 5 strikeouts to start the season, though, but he has had, a decently tough start to the season when it comes to teams he's faced, St. Louis and the Angels, who both have a lot of home run potential hitters, and he did give up some home runs to them, but he has some nice upside in this matchup against Detroit, and I do think he has a pretty low ceiling, but he has a pretty good, he has an okay floor as well. As for Jordan Montgomery, now he's in a similar situation. He's actually been okay to start the season despite 2 tough matchups. I do think he's a really good option on DraftKings. I actually think that the Bassett Montgomery stack is actually definitely viable here. He's had 2 tough opponents to start the season. He has some upside here and is at a reasonable price. Pittsburgh is also a lower quality team, so that definitely gives him some upside as well. And they have some injuries that's going to limit their lineup even a little bit more. And then if you want kind of like a Hail Mary option, Johnny Brito is a decent option for the Yankees. He's had 2 decent games to start the season, only played 5 innings in those 2 games, so do keep that in mind. But he hasn't really had it too much problem, and he had 8 strikeouts in those games, and he's a little bit cheaper than Bassett and Montgomery, so he's a good P2 second option, especially with the fact that he's a rookie, so this is his first look in the majors, but he's done okay. So I do think he's somebody worth taking a look at. But this isn't the best ideal matchup for him either. With that said, let's get into our catchers here. Now at catcher, we actually have 4 guys that are all viable today at this position on DraftKings. So depending on which of these 4, and that's Contreras, Stevenson, Contreras, and Kirk, basically all 4 catchers have home run potential. Milwaukee and Cincinnati's catchers have the best position for home runs. The top 3 have a better stackability when it comes to Stevenson, Contreras from St. Louis, and Kirk. Let's just hope that 1 or 2 of them don't play to make it easier to choose which one to utilize. I'm probably looking at either Tyler Stevenson or William Contreras as the most likely options for home runs, so do keep those guys in mind. At first base, catcher is really the only position that it seems really chaotic when it comes to trying to figure out which guy is the best. At first base, we do have Vladimir Guerrero Jr. He started the season extremely well, hitting .417 on the season. He's pretty expensive, but the way pitchers are today, he's definitely viable and definitely usable on the slate. He's not a must-play because there's some other good options at this position, but he does have some validity here. I am also going to look at Will Myers for Cincinnati. He looks like he's in a really good spot here. He hasn't hit a home run yet this season, but he's got some nice potential in this matchup, and being at home and a plus matchup against average pitching is definitely going to give him some utility here. Then we're going to look at Rowdy Tellez, who's kind of he's not a Hail Mary play, but he's kind of a home run play on this slate where he has potential to hit a home run, and anytime that he has that kind of potential, he's somebody you want to at least take a look at. He's definitely worth the consideration here. At second base, I like Nolan Gorman the most. He's got big time potential here. He started the season extremely well, including 4 home runs, 2 home runs in the last 2 games, obviously in Colorado. But he's had good hitting throughout the season so far. He's only had 2 games where he didn't get a hit, and he's had fantasy points in all but 1 game this season. So I do think he's in a really good spot, especially if he draws a really good spot in the lineup today. He's definitely a great option at this price range. Jonathan India is a good alternative to him, but he's a little bit more expensive, but he has some nice upside, and he's going to be better at home, and so I do think he's got some utility here. He's a little bit riskier than some of the other options, but I do think he is viable on the slate. I just don't love his price so much. And then Brendan Donovan is somebody you can be kind of contrarian with. He's kind of a high risk or high reward option today, though he's a little bit too expensive, which doesn't make me like it as much, but he has some pay up potential here as a home run hitter, a guy that will get on base and stuff like that. So I do think he's viable, but he's probably riskier than the 2 that I mentioned beforehand. At third base, we're going to look at Spencer Steer as a good value play. He started the season really well, hitting 300, and he's even gotten a couple home runs this year. He's also hit the ball pretty well just throughout the season so far. He averaged 7 fantasy points against Philly in their first group of games against them. I not necessarily expect him to do that good again, but he's priced really cheaply, and he's got some upside in this matchup, and so he's definitely a great option at third base, especially considering there's not much value at the position. Matt Chapman is also very interesting here. Now, he started the season hitting nearly 500. He's had some massive games, including, I think, 4 straight over 12 fantasy points, including 3 home runs in those 4 games. He's been hitting the ball extremely well. He hasn't had a single game, with the exception of Game 2 of the season, where he didn't get a hit. I look for him to be a very good option on the slate, though he is pretty expensive and probably going to be somewhat hard to roster since there's going to be some other places where we want to pay up. And then Alec Boom is kind of an interesting option here for Philly. Now, they are in Cincinnati, and he is against a decent pitcher, and he could strike out because he is a strikeout kind of guy. But he has hit the ball pretty well so far this season. He does have home run potential in this game, so he's definitely worth taking a look here. He can also play first base as well. At shortstop, I do have Trey Turner. Now, I don't normally put a $6,300 player at court play, but the metrics just scream that he's in a good spot here. Obviously, he's got a tough matchup when it comes to the pitcher, but he's at Cincinnati, which is an advantage, and he's hit the ball really well to start the season, hitting 321. I think he's going to hit a home run in this game, and that's why I have him at a core play. He's obviously going to need one to pay off here, but he's got some great utility. Not only that, but this position is very weak when it comes to viable options. The really only good alternative that I really like today is Willie Adames, and he's been kind of streaky to start the season, not quite as consistent as I'd like him to be, and he's not got the best matchup either. Even though he's going against a pitcher that he should be able to do well against, I do like Turner just a heck of a lot better in this matchup. So overall, that's why I wanted to look at Turner. But I just don't see much else at that position, so I do think it's worth paying up at that one. In the outfield, we're going to start with Judge, who hasn't actually hit a home run in a few games now, but he has big-time potential here, and he's got a nice matchup. He's had 3 games since his 2 home run game against Baltimore. I think he's somewhat due. His price is obviously super expensive, but he is viable on the slate, and he is usable if you wanted to move off Turner, but I do think Turner is a safer option. Then we'll look at George Springer for Toronto. Now, he's a little bit pricey here on FanDuel, or on DraftKings, but he does have some utility here. He's a much better play on FanDuel, where his price is much more reduced. Soto is also very interesting today here on DraftKings and FanDuel. At $5,600, he has some nice upside. He has home run potential in this game, and that's kind of where I draw it here. I think that's where he's going to get it, but I don't think necessarily that you need to pay up for any of those top 3 players in the outfield, because there's actually quite a bit of value at this position. The first being Dalton Varsho at $4,100. He just feels a really good price here, and he's got some potential here. I do wish that he had that catcher upside that he used to have in his old team, but I still like him here a lot. He's had a really good start to the season, and I think he's a viable option here in a core play. Tyler O'Neill is also very interesting for St. Louis. Now, he's a little bit more expensive than I'd like him to be, but he does have some nice upside here in a St. Louis stack. He's definitely somebody that I would consider. if you decide to stack that team. Will Myers has some really good upside for Cincinnati. He's obviously also able to play at first base, like I mentioned, but he really looks like a great option in the outfield since his price is so cheap, and he's got some really good upside in this matchup. Burleson for St. Louis, if he draws a front end top three start in the lineup, he would definitely be somebody I would consider on the slate. He's hit the ball pretty well to start the season, and he's had a really good start when it comes to hits to start the season as well. So I really think he's a viable option here. And then Nick Castellanos for Philadelphia at $4,300. He hasn't hit a home run yet, but he is sort of due, and I do think he has some upside in this matchup for that kind of situation. So with that said, that's why I'm on DraftKings. Let's move over here to FanDuel. And like I said, I have similar core plays here with Gorman, Turner, Soto, and Varsho. Though I added Soto because he's got nice upside here. As for the pitching, we're going to look at Nick Lodolo first. He's got more strikeouts than anyone by a lot on the slate, but he's very expensive here on FanDuel. I don't think he's a must-play by any stretch. He's kind of high risk, high reward. He does have some weird potential to have a big game, but I also don't love him, especially since I like several players from Philadelphia. Then we'll look at Chris Bassett here for Toronto. Now, he has some really good upside in this matchup. He's underpriced here on FanDuel compared to Jordan Montgomery and even Brito. So I do think he's a really good option. He's a little bit riskier just because he has really low floor, but his ceiling is good enough that he could be one of the top 3 pitchers on the slate, especially with the matchup there. Jordan Montgomery is a lot more expensive than Bassett, but he does have some big-time upside here. His matchup is not bad. The real issue that I have with him is that he just doesn't have a lot of ceiling games last season, so I'm a little bit concerned about that. His price is okay, though, so he's definitely viable on the slate. And then Johnny Brito, he also has some nice upside here. Not like any of the other 3 above him that I mentioned, but he does have some utility here as a rookie pitcher who's started the season pretty solidly. The real risk here is that he doesn't go super deep in the game, but he does have the win potential because the Yankees are the Yankees. So let's go ahead and get into our catchers and first baseman here. And I really just have 2 guys to consider here. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. at $3,900. He has big time upside. He's hit the ball extremely well. He's got home run potential in this game. I almost wanted to make him a must play, but his price made it hard to do that. But he's definitely viable here. And then an alternative to him is Paul Goldschmidt, who's hit the ball really well to start the season despite only having one home run so far. He does have that viability on the slate. At second base, I think Nolan Gorman is a must-play here, though he's priced about the same as everybody else at this position, so he's not like the salary saver that he is on DraftKings, but he has some nice upside here. Jonathan India has hit the ball well to start the season. The metrics just don't scream as good for him today as they do for Gorman, so that's why I like him a little bit better. And then Brendan Donovan, he's kind of a contrarian option. He doesn't hit the ball quite as well as the top 2 guys, but he does have some utility here as a third option at this position. At third base, there's really just 2 guys to consider, one being Manny Machado, who's underpriced here for San Diego, and a good matchup. He hasn't hit a home run yet this season, and he is kind of due, and his price is so cheap that he makes it worthwhile. And if you don't want to use him, you can also go with Spencer Steer, who I do feel like has home run potential in this game. He's hit the ball extremely well to start the year and has nice upside in this matchup. I also wouldn't hate putting Steer and Machado in the utility spot today as a price option as well. At the shortstop position, I mean, really Trey Turner, even though he's going against Cincinnati, I do think he's going to have a big time potential here for a home run. His price is cheap enough here on FanDuel that he's basically a must-play, so I do think he is a great option. But if you want an alternative to him, Willy Adames is the guy to go with. He's got some good upside here, even though he hasn't been quite as consistent as I'd like him to be. He has some good upside and good scoring potential. And into the outfield, we have basically Aaron Judge, who's very expensive here on FanDuel, so he's not a must-play by any stretch of the imagination, but he does have home run potential. I like these other guys a lot better, including Juan Soto, who has home run potential in this game. In fact, I do think he'll hit a home run today, so do keep that in mind. As for George Springer, I think his price is fair on this site, and he's definitely usable, especially if you pay down for some pitching. And then also Varsho for for Toronto looks like a great play on the slate. He's hit the ball really solid to start the season, and he's got some nice upside here. And then also Will Myers. If you need to save money at this position to pay up someplace else, he would be a great way to do it. He's also a good utility option if you don't have much money left over. So overall, I think the slate is really solid. I think the scoring will be pretty good, and I do like both sides today. So if you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below, and have a nice day, guys.